Hey, next level listeners. Today I am joined by the amazing Renee Rossi. Renee, you just want to go ahead and introduce yourself really quickly?
Sure. Thanks for having me here, Zane. Um, I am an entrepreneurial organizational coach. So I help put entrepreneurs and their leadership teams back in the driving seat for their business. I primarily work out of Canada here, but I speak across North America, helping to shift the mindset and empower entrepreneurs to get what they want from their business and live their best life. I firsthand know the challenges of entrepreneurial living and with the methodologies that I use, I really help to um, allow entrepreneurs overcome a lot of the challenges that I face in my entrepreneurial journey and set them up for success. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Of course, I'm excited. And I actually just want to go ahead and preface the conversation by double clicking on one thing you said earlier in terms of putting business owners back in the driver's seat. So I know when we were talking offline, there was a lot of discussion in terms of they're currently in the passenger seat now and they're more observing their overall business as opposed to leading it. So do you just want to go ahead and touch upon that really quickly?
hmm A lot of the entrepreneurs that I come across, many of them are founding entrepreneurs. So they were often the first ones in the business building, doing, creating, hustling, selling. And as they scale, they start to realize they can't do it all themselves anymore. And they start to add people to the organization. And through that, it creates a lot of organizational complexity. And in order to keep control of the business, they very much stay in the business, doing a lot of the hustling right there at the front lines of their staff, which is good for a period of time. But at some point, somebody needs to elevate to the helm of the organization, step into that leadership driving seat to really forge the path forward, create organizational direction, empower teams with role clarity, data, and so forth, so that they can perform, meet the expectations, and align everybody's effort towards that united vision. But while they're very much in the business, we don't know where we're going. And we're certainly not going to get there until we get clear on that. So elevating them, putting them back in control in that driving seat to really take the business to the next level is very much uh, connected to the work that I do.
hmm Yeah. I really, really love that analogy because I think after you said it when we were talking offline, I just went back and I just began to think about it a little more. So
Mhm.
definitely love that. So just in terms of key metrics and just the main thing we're going to go ahead and talk about here, just very, very focused on logistics. So can you just talk a bit more about what key metrics are and then as a business owner, how you can go ahead and define them?
hmm So there are two kind of realms that we look at here. So the more strategic metrics that give you a sense on the organizational performance, the financial performance, a lot of those numbers are typically lagging, reporting to budget, reporting to goals that we've set, and also contextual to variance to say last year and so forth. So they're more strategic numbers and they are very important and they are often reported on a monthly or quarterly basis. But once those numbers are accomplished and reported, there's nothing we can do about them. And so a lot of the empowerment around using data real time in terms of metrics comes down to identifying the key activities in the business that drive results, the
hmm
transactional stuff, and getting a pulse on those activities on a weekly basis, real time, so that we can maneuver the activities, dig into what the issues are. Why are our leads off? Why is our conversion rate low? Rather than waiting till the end of the quarter or the month to report that, and then ask ourselves, "Wow, what happened there?" So there's a two-part process here. One's more strategic, reporting, lagging numbers, and then the more leading indicators that we're looking at on a more real-time weekly basis. Both are important. One's more strategic, one's more transactional, but I feel entrepreneurial businesses, we get good at like the financial reports and we hire outside help and we've got that stuff, but we lose touch with what's happening on the ground and
hmm
we lose control around driving the right kind of activities that lead to those results. So metrics are, in my experience, in those two realms. And as we start to elevate to that driving seat out of the operations, having a pulse on those activities across the three realms of the business, which is sales and marketing, operations, and finance, real time, allows you to keep a pulse on things, but not feel like you have to dig all the way into the business constantly. It's empowering, it drives accountability, and allows you to be back in control of the business.
And then do you think key metrics should differentiate based on which industry you're in as a business, or are key metrics going to be the same, I guess, industry wide in terms of, okay, I'm looking for lead generation here based off social media, just things like that? Or do you think depending on industry, it's to be very, very specific to what your selling product is?
Mhm. Building a meaningful scorecard, especially those real-time activity-based ones, I feel is the hardest thing that my clients work through. And in that process, there is a lot of organizational learning that takes place. They often beg and plead, please, Renee, just give us a standard scorecard. And it's heartbreaking, but the reality is that they need to understand the activities that drive the result. And that's very much a snowflake situation. Every company is different. Every sector is different. Every market is different. And every stage of the journey is different. So it's about understanding where you are in your life cycle of as an organization, understanding your sector and the market that you're in, constraints that you face. You can absolutely replicate some of the standard metrics that are used in your sector. You know, if you're in, a sector such as a marketing agency, you're going to be looking at certain activities, and there are some norms there, but then very much looking into your processes and understand your unique workflows that drive those results as well. And coming to a blend of the two, recognizing where you are at in your journey is key. Certain segments, that I work in, in manufacturing, for example, there are certain standards, but in terms of benchmarking, we want to be benchmarking to the right stage in the journey. And sometimes actually forming an average of your actual data and understanding what your priorities and your goals are can help you better inform what your goals are around those metrics. So it's definitely a blend of the two. There's so much abundance of information out there, free to market information, and people are very responsive when we ask the question. I would seek to understand the market, but very much look into the business, especially tied to people and process.
Perfect. So there's this I guess bifurcation or division between being very business aware, right, and understanding specifically what your unique value proposition is, what you're doing to get in contact with customers, but then on the flip side of that, understanding what the overall market looks like, because your analysis or how your overall industry is going to be measured is really predicated on everything that's surrounding it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's a time-space learning journey. So we recommend on a company scorecard, on a weekly scorecard, you're looking at 5 to 15 numbers. And then, really just looking at just a handful that really give you a pulse on the activities in the business. A lot of the financial strategic stuff, it's pretty standard. They all tie to organizational financial health, but the activity stuff is very much going to vary from one organization to the next. And as you are evolving, new things will reveal themselves. And as you mature, for example, while you have a fairly uncomplicated small team and uncomplicated production process, error rates are pretty low, especially if you've got a high maturity of people that are doing technically strong, been doing it a while. Error rates are fairly low, and productivity might be at a certain volume. But as you maybe elevate them to leadership, and we're getting some new trainees into the organization, we really want to put a lens on certain activities that we no longer control to the extent that we used to. So it's a journey over time to recognize what is most important, and the ability to step back from the business and look at the business as if it's not your own.
Mm-hmm.
And I ask yourself, if this was not my business and somebody else's business, what would I say that they should look at? A lot of the answers are already in the business. Gaining perspective, having a look around, and asking yourself the tough questions can really reveal a lot of data points. And I feel there's a Roosevelt quote that says, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And I also think, and part of that is also the thief of learning about your unique business. When we're doing all the time comparing it to other businesses, it's important for that market awareness and periodically doing that. But understanding and learning through this data process in your business takes that business capacity for growth to a whole new level, because you're in control. So that's my feel on that.
And then any specific tips for small business owners who might be going through the process right now and aren't seeing the numbers that they want to? And I know for me personally, after I cultivated my first business 17 months ago, we were taking a look at the numbers after the first week after the launch, and then, post launch again 2 weeks after. And there was no satisfaction because we weren't reaching the numbers that we wanted to. And so I wouldn't say that we were unmotivated, but there was definitely some in terms of call to action. What are we supposed to do next? So any advice for small business owners just to uplift their spirits and in terms of not gaining the results that they're looking for right now?
Like tied to my previous point, having trust that the answers are in the business and the answers are in the room, and asking ourselves, what are we not doing to ask ourselves the right question, to go on that journey of learning about our business and seeking to understand what's really going on here. And so I recommend with my clients just to capture and state what the 5 or so results are that they want. Revenue, new business, certain gross margin, whatever the results are that they seek, volume, capacity, and so forth, and take 5 steps back from that. Actually state all those 5 steps back from that result that drives the result. And then circle the key activities and the conversion points on that journey towards revenue. For example, new business acquisition, account growth, average spend per account, and so forth, and really going in and understanding like what is the makeup of revenue and what you control versus what you don't control, and what your capacity is to optimize those key activities that drive that revenue. I feel that we often look externally for answers, and going inward is a deep space of learning and evolution of the business. So doing that with either external help, a coach, or a mentor. Mentors are great. They create really wonderful space. They just ask really smart questions, and they compel you to go inward. So I think with the right leadership team and the right external support, very much a lot of the answers are in the business. But going 5 steps back from those 3 to 5 results that you seek is very, very enlightening.
Perfect. I love it. And so now I want to transition a bit more into some more financial related topics. So specifically in terms of research prior to generating any sort of finance work going forward. So just primarily, how do you go ahead and figure out a revenue model? And then based off of that, how do you derive your CLV or consumer lifetime value?
Yeah, so I feel like researching the market that you're seeking to go into, finding out what your passion is as an entrepreneur, will help you endure the up and the down. Going into a new market, understanding, the existing revenue models, and asking questions around what's working, what's not working, looking at those, competitors in your market and seeking to understand their business model. There's tends to be a lot of movement. I'll give, like, for example, the IT sector. For example, the managed IT business. It went through a wave. First of all, everyone was break fix, and then they all went into managed services. Then they realized that it was a benefit in a hybrid model of the recurring revenue as well as the project work to really generate a lot of profitability through those projects. So, and then I've met some IT businesses that have gone all the way back to the break fix from a strategic approach. So understanding history, asking really good questions, and understanding what your opportunities to generate recurring revenue is really, really important. But then also some of that variable revenue that you can drive, on a project basis or equipment sale basis, and then support it with some of that recurring revenue. I met with an equipment company this week, $180 million company, plateaued on profitability. And so I'm like, can you tell me a little bit about your revenue model? Where are you sourcing their revenue? And they're like, well, we're about 60% equipment scale, 70% on equipment sale, and about 20% on service and 10% on parts. And so I'm like, so your profitability is being squeezed. They're like, yeah, the manufacturer is really pushing us on the price, and the cost of the equipment that we sell is really increasing. So I'm like, so all those pieces of equipment, If you're only serving a small percentage of it, who else is serving it? And they were like, well, clearly other third-party providers. I'm like, so let's bring some of that revenue in-house and create more balance. So understanding what is and what the upside potential is to do more work for your existing customer base is critical. Understanding what your opportunities are to increase your pricing model and change your pricing model over time. A lot of these data points are already available for you. I would say ask, start somewhere, and then every quarter step out of the business and ask yourself, what's working, what's not working, where are we generating our revenue, how much is it recurring, and how much is new business, and really seek to understand the data that's already there and help use that then to help you make really good strategic decisions going forward. So understanding the market, understanding the upside potential for both for revenue growth and avenues is important, but the more revenue you generate from the same customer base, the better. The more repeat business and the more cross-selling you do, you've already engaged. They've already said, please take my money and my time. Mm-hmm. I want to work with you. How can you then bring more value to them through other revenue streams in a value-added way? And then your revenue growth potential just goes up. Even just by increasing your new business by 10% and your account growth by 10% annually, you will be able to curve your revenue growth projection. In terms of understanding the lifetime value of your customer, understanding the life cycle of the customer is really, really important. Understanding that customer journey, where your key conversion, renewal points, additional revenue selling, it takes place in the journey, mapping them out. For example, a client of mine, company will typically work with me for 24 months. They on average see me X number of times at an X number of revenue points. If they stay on longer than that, their revenue goes up. And my ability to sell additional services happens at certain stages in the journey. So mapping the customer life cycle, understanding your revenue model is key, and pricing appropriately. There's no point pricing yourself out of the market because then it all just becomes disconnected. So it's really about understanding your target market and customizing your revenue model to that, and understanding deeply the customer journey and those conversion points.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up the point about adding additional services throughout the process, right? So as time goes on, so you're not saying, okay, here's my standard package, and then you can get all of these add-ons now, but it's something that, okay, post sign up, now that we're working with you, then now we begin to see, okay, so Renee's providing me all of this value, our numbers are obviously up, so it makes sense to continue investing in something that's already working, right? And so now you've generated some credibility, you've already generated some sort of relationship with the business. Mm-hmm. And so now there's so much more traction in terms of the relationship you guys have built, as well as what's moving forward for them, right? What's the outlook? So I love that you're not just, putting it on and just saying, okay, here.
And entrepreneurship is an evolution. You've got to have a viable business concept to start with. You've got to have a plan that people can connect to. You've got to hire the right people, good process, data points, and so forth. But you don't just set it and forget it. Mm-hmm. It's got a life of its own, and it evolves and grows over time, and it will hit ceilings. And if you're doing the right work from an organizational management, leadership, and execution standpoint, you should be able to see those ceilings coming and understand that our current product mix will only sustain us to a certain level of growth in this given market. We need to look at what other revenue streams and other services we can provide our customers maybe by year 2 and year 3. And you don't have to have the answers, but the right goals and long-range plans in place will help keep those things on the radar. And so that every quarter and every year, as you move closer towards those next levels of your business journey, you're already thinking ahead. What more do we need to do for our customers? How much more profitability can we derive? There's so much more, even just from a really good process around how you make your strategic decisions over the course of your business journey. But a solid plan to start and a good team to execute is critical, and then very much learning as you go.
Perfect. Yeah. I love the fact that you talk about, team specifically and what you need to do. So can you just touch upon culture specifically and how important that is even prior to launching a business or getting started with that overall plan?
Mm-hmm. And I know you want to talk a lot about metrics, so I will still loop it around to metrics here. So it's important that as an entrepreneur, we create a clear and compelling vision, and we build the right structure of accountability we call seats to execute. This is very much Jim Collins' right people, right seat philosophy here. So we want to say, okay, this is where we want to go. What's the right people structure of accountability to execute on that plan? Then we say, okay, here's our culture. These are our core values. This is the structure of accountability. We then go about getting the right people in the right seats who are skilled to do that work for each of those given seats. So they're in a seat that they want, and have capacity to do. They align with the culture. They see where they're going. And the next thing to do is get on with it. So as you grow, it's a lot easier when it's just you or just a couple of you to really keep a pulse on the activities and how we're doing. But as you grow and scale and you've got different levels of your accountability chart, you don't necessarily know what Mary's doing, at the front line. So the data points are important. So you define the seat, set the clear direction, and then say, okay, some of the key activities in this seat are A and B. Those activities need to be at a certain volume every week. So Mary, in that seat, this is the accountabilities, the priorities, and this is the measurable that you will use to tell yourself if you're on track, and I will use to get a pulse on whether you're on track if you need my help, but I won't have to micromanage you every day. So clear accountabilities, clear direction, and then empower people through data points, through the metrics, to get a pulse themselves on how they're doing and understand how their activities drive organizational results. Then they start to connect the dots. The engagement's higher, the buy-in's better, and the alignment around executing on the vision just goes up to a whole new level.
And then one more thing I want to touch upon before we get into a bit more of the managerial side and organizing a team. So I'm currently consulting with the company that works with contact tracing specifically in terms of COVID. And so one of the biggest things that my team and I did prior to even getting started with what our potential solution was really taking a look at different use cases in terms of applications that had worked with virality specifically, and then how people were able to generate some traction off the ground. So transferring that back to everything you do you demonstrate and show all of your clients this use case worked, so let's go ahead and pioneer off of this? Or how does that, I guess, entire process go for the small business owners who are looking for real world examples to understand what the overall landscape could look like?
Yeah. So from my standpoint, I help them learn tools and be empowered to very much organize and execute internally. I don't help them test a business case, apply it to the market. That's very much on them to figure out. And so I would say a lot of, startup advisors, innovation centers for those new markets have a lot of data that, new entrepreneurs can access. There's a lot of also information on the web, and people are very much open to sharing. Once there's a proof of concept, my role is then to help to say that, make sure that light stays on. Right. So once it's alive and well, or seems to be well, my role is to help set them up with the right framework inside the business to make sure it actually, you got to stay on, the flame stays alive. You're going to stay on track towards that vision and actually execute on it, because it's actually not that. The most challenging thing is not necessarily accessing the data and coming up with the idea. It's operationalizing it and executing on that idea. That's the hard part, because that's where the human element comes in. That's where you got to have a plan, the right people, right data points, and reduce the complexity, pave the way so you can actually make your vision a reality. Without the execution plan, the vision remains an hallucination. So starting up, there's a lot of advisory tools, resources, and so forth out there. I'm coming in at once it's alive, making sure it stays alive long term. But yeah, and certainly, I mean, there's so much information out there. Putting testing the market is important. We also have a 2-page business plan. So it's kind of like from your core values, your 10-year target, your 3-year picture, down to your next 90 days, what must get done, and your obstacles that you see for yourself. So 2-page business plan. I say to anybody, if you go out there, you get a great idea, you ask around, you get some good data, seems legitimate, get from the top of your business plan to the bottom. And if you're clear around what you need to do in the next 90 days, all the way to that point, and know what the obstacles are that you need to be aware of, it's an actionable plan then. That's when you put it into gear, get the right people on board. And the data is where I primarily use data in organizations, is internally keeping control, getting back in the driving seat of the business.
Love it, love it. So as we transition here into sort of the management side of things, I know we just talked about organizing a team and really understanding company culture, but how do you determine how many people are needed for the business? So after you
Mhm.
devise what the overall structure can look like, how many people per business sector should you get?
Yeah. Well, it does vary. All of these answers, well, it varies. So understanding that you're going to need doers in the business to do the work and understanding tied to your volume projections, and utilization of labor and so forth, where you project your volume levels will be and revenue will be, well, then you work back from there and figure out the amount of people that you need to generate that volume of work to sustain those, you know, selling something is one thing, but you got to deliver on it as well. So understanding the number of people that you need to deliver on your commitments is key. Having a leadership team of less doers but more leaders and managers of the organization is important, and we really recommend that you have a leader of sales and marketing, a leader of operations, and a leader of finance, and one person to make sure it's all coming together. So I
Mhm.
typically see a core leadership team of 3 to 4 people, and then a ratio. It depends. If you have a lot of automation in place on the sales and marketing end, you really probably won't need a very big sales team. But watching very closely your operations, which is where you deliver on your commitments that you've made, is really, really important to get that mix right. So, and putting in, per person utilization, productivity levels, training requirements, and so forth is important. So everyone is sector specific, but I tend to see operations is where the bulk of the people live in terms of the execution part, and understanding what your projections are and backtracking to your labor capacity is really important to
Mhm.
connect the dots there. But if we have all just, people doing the work and we don't have anybody at the helm of the business, we're going to not be able to see the forest through the trees. We're not going to be able to make good strategic decisions. And it's very lonely at the top when you're a solo founder and you're the single leader and you've got a whole bunch of doers. We need to form that team, that strategic team that is really going to help take the business to the next level. You might find your name in all of those boxes at the beginning, and then over time, you strategically get the right people, either elevate them or hire them in. um, Always looking to right size your accountability chart for the stage of your business journey. Always looking 6 to 12 months out from now on that accountability chart is a really healthy space to play in. Not get too far ahead of ourselves. Too labor, our payroll costs are too high, and we've got too many people and no work for them. And we don't want to be on the other side of things too. It's constantly a process of right sizing at every stage of your business journey. Always looking 6 to 12 months out from now.
Mhm. Perfect, perfect. I love it. Before I get into my last question, just want to go ahead and thank you again so much. Really, really appreciate all of the insight, and I cannot wait to hear just the feedback from all of our listeners in terms of specific takeaways that they had. So thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you. I wish that I could be more specific and targeted. And if I had a, individual business case study in front of me, we could talk more depth about that. I'm really at this point helping to try and open up the dialogue around the conversations that need to be had to access the data, the information that's already in within. And if it's not within the business, to then go out to the market to ask the right questions to seek it out and bring it
Mhm.
into the business. But I feel very much that there's so much already inside the business that going deeper there, understanding the business deeply and continuing to master that process through data to put yourself back in the driving seat of the business. It's like, that's the entrepreneurial leadership advantage. And if you can nail that, you can almost take any business to the next level.
And so this past summer, I had the chance to read the book Rocket Fuel alongside Mr. Sargent, who we've mentioned a couple of times before, and he's going to be on the podcast as well. And so, what role do you think a visionary plays in terms of a business, and then what role do you think an integrator plays in the business as well?
This is one of my favorite topics. In fact, I did a podcast with Mr. Sargent all about this. So the reason why I do what I do is because I met a very visionary entrepreneur who then became my
Hmm.
husband. And so I use this methodology that I teach to become like the integrator in our life, to stabilize things, to make sure we have calm, order, remove obstacles, and so forth. So from my personal and professional experience and all the tens of 20 and 30 companies that I work with, very unique style of people here, and in terms of entrepreneurship, they both play critical roles. So the visionary is much more idea generator, forward thinking, very much living already in the future, risk taker, big thinker, big relationship holder, and their view is very much outward and beyond now into the future. So their role is to keep pushing the boundaries and the limits so that we keep on an upward trajectory. Integrator is very much a pragmatic realist, very much in the business, looking into the business, making sure that everybody's actively executing on the plan. They know what the plan is, they know what the expectations are, and they're actively executing. They help remove barriers in the business, remove barriers for leaders, elevate leaders, empower the business through systemization, process, data, all that. So they're very much looking in the business, very much in the business execution, delivering and doing, driving the doing in the business, and then the visionaries driving the future of the business upward and beyond. Healthy combination when done well, high conflict when it's not healthy. They are designed to have a creative tension and very much be looking at things from opposite sides, but their level of trust and faith in each other and respect for each other's role here is key. When you bring the two together, it creates a very powerful relationship we call the rocket fuel relationship. They are the parents of the organization. When they go into the business, despite their conflict, they need to be on the same page. That's when we have the makings of really great organizations.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. Really, really appreciate the insight. I think that
Pleasure.
that is an amazing wrap up for today.
Thank you. All the best. Thanks for having me.